So what we did this morning, we purchased the 24-unit apartment complex. We ran the cash flow model. We determined it's a good investment. We put all cash into it, and we refinanced it. We leveraged it up. We determined all our free and clear rate of return, cash-on-cash rate of return, what our minimum occupancy ratio, break-even occupancy ratio is, and we determined what our year one total return on equity is. So from here, I don't know where my slides are going. We need to build our model out for the next 5 years. Okay? So what we're going to assume is that the income is going to escalate at 3% per year. And we're going to keep the 5% vacancy rate at a static rate of 5%. Or, you know, in reality, do we know what's going to happen in the next 5 minutes, let alone 5 years from now? No. But if you project 3% annual escalation in your rent, you're going to be right in there. Now, reality over the last couple of years, I mean, I've been jacking up rent, you know, like crazy. But if you're building your model out, you want to keep it static, you know. I'm not trying to build my model going, okay, well, you know, what if I can raise the rent X? You want to kind of keep it where you are in your budget and project out a rational manner. But if you're just building a static income model to look out into the future, putting in 3% escalation, you're going to be right in there. It's not fictional, if you will. Because over time, without, you know, the inflation rate, the general economy typically escalates about 3% per year. Anybody have any question about how to do this? We take our first year PGI, and then we escalate that by 3%, 3%, 3%, 3%. And notice that we're going to sell in year 5, correct? But we've built our income out to where? Year 6. We have to determine what the income is going to be for our investor the next 12 months when we sell the property. That's called the terminal cap rate, which we'll look at. All right, so everyone understand how the rent is going to escalate 3% over that 6-year period. Everyone have this or have any questions before we look at how expenses are going to escalate? All right, so we're going to project here that expenses are going to escalate at about 2.5%. Historically, that's a good average. And you can program that in there. Of course, when you're operating the property next year, year after next, you're going to refine those numbers based upon the previous operating year and how the expenses actually played out. If you're in a market where you think that expenses are going to escalate at 3%, then you program in that 3%. And then it's a wash between the 3% escalation of income and 3% escalation in your operating expense over the 5-year holding period. Notice we're also going to plug in those operating expenses for year 6. Now this is the total amount of operating expenses. In year 1, that $111,000. So just escalate that 2.5%, 2.5%, 2.5%. All right, everybody have this? We move on. Now let's look at our 5-year before tax cash flow model, the entire view, if you will. Notice that we're only going to build our NOI model out to year 6. So year 5 is actually what we're going to collect. Whereas in year 6 is our projection of what we're going to sell the property on and what the new investor is going to collect over that next 12-month period. Correct? So we see that everything is the same. Annual debt service didn't change. But guess what? We're getting more before tax cash flow. And very interesting thing happens here. We started out with a 12.81% cash on cash rate of return. Look at it over there in year 5. 17.9%. And that's without calculating, principal and the cash flow, correct? What's going to happen to our OER? Is it going to go down or is it going to go up? Looks like it's going down, doesn't it? What about your NIR? It's increased slightly. Cost per unit has increased, but all the metrics tell us that holding the property over 5 years, you can rationally expect this to happen. This isn't, made up land. This is, what's going to happen if we hold this property over that period of time. The longer you hold a piece of real estate, especially income-producing property, the more valuable it's going to become to you based upon all that anticipation that we talked about this morning and all the benefits that you're going to receive from holding that property. Does it get better each year to hold the property? Are we amortizing debt? Or is our principal increasing? Is our before-tax cash flow increasing? Of course it is. Comments or questions on this? I would advise, I'd advise you to do this, to make these calculations, because, of course they are all projections, but, in all reality, this will compare in comparison to what the actual numbers really are, because it'll be that good over the period of time. Unless, you hit a period where all your tenants split and, you have operating expenses and debt service continuing on with no tenants to pay mortgage.
I have a question taking
Yes.
that in reverse. What if you have no vacancy? What if your tenants continue to rent, they are willing to pay the rental increase? Do you then go back and lower that vacancy rate if it happens over a period of time, or do you leave it at 5%?
On this static model, I would leave it at 5%, because you're factoring in. You can't really predict what it's going to be, but 5% gives you, hey, we're going to lose money somewhere, somehow in that vacancy and collection loss. Somehow tenants are going to stiff us. We're not going to be able to get that income. So just calculating the static model of 5% is, it may not actually reflect, what market conditions are, but they'll be very close unless there's some anomaly where, it gets to be overbuilding, or it gets to be where, all your tenants are leaving to go buy their own home, which, we have no idea about when that could or may happen. But the great thing about this is having a stabilized property, because that income and expenses are stabilized. We're not projecting something outrageous like, oh, well, rent's going to jump up 18% next month, and, operating expenses are going to go to zero. That's not going to reflect what's happening in the market. Where with what you're trying to do here is you're building a model that's pretty accurately going to reflect what market conditions will be in 5 years. Did that answer your question?
Sorry, I was muted. Yes, you answered my question. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you. All right, can we move on? All right, now we already took the money. Understand, we already took the money from the lender. But now we're going to go back and look at all the steps that the lender went through to determine if they would in fact entertain making a loan on this property that we just purchased and that we just made, close to 17% last year. But let's step back to last year when we're talking to the mortgage company saying, hey, will you lend us the money? And lenders already told us what they would do for us, correct? All right, now we're going to go through the steps and look at the property from the mortgage lender's financial perspective. Understand, it's only until we have all three views, looking at the property from all three perspectives, all cash investor, equity investor, and mortgage lender, do we understand what the full productivity of that piece of income producing property will actually do for us. So the first thing we looked at was LTV. That is the lender's first view. Oh, hey, we'll do 75% LTV. And 75% LTV has been historical. Most multifamily lenders, developers, those kind of development lenders, construction loan, will do 75% LTV and permanent loan or your takeout loan. Now the LTV measures the risk that the lender is going to absorb when they make the loan. So the higher their LTV, what happens to their risk? Their risk is increased if their LTV is increased. What if they do 100% financing? Is their risk greatly increased? What about all those lenders who are offering 125% financing? I couldn't even believe that, let alone understand it. But it was happening, I went to California and, it was like, here, pick your loan, negative amortization, whatever you want to pick. I'm like, I said, hey, isn't this a house of cards you're building here? Oh, no, this is what we do. Yeah, and I'd talk to people, especially in my class, I'd say, wow, you all must be sitting on a lot of home equity, right? They're like, oh no, we have to refinance every few years just to keep up with, living expense. Yeah. Anyway, the risk, the more the lender loans against the property, the greater their risk of default becomes. It's almost like they're doing 100% financing. If they're doing 100% financing, have they also demanded that the occupancy be 100%? Which it's never going to be, unless it's some real odd situation like the last few years. You can look at this and say, hey, the lower the LTV, the lower the risk of default. The higher the LTV, the greater the risk of default. Okay, everybody have this? Now, how did we figure that? We determined that the property did in fact give us $130K NOI, and we wanted a 10% return, and if we were willing to accept 10% rate of return, then that property had better in fact kick out $130K over that 12-month period. If it did in fact kick out that 130K over 12 months, then we did in fact get our 10% rate of return. So what you would do is you would just multiply 0.75, and if you have different numbers than I do, it's because your calculator is not rounding out. I usually go out to 6 decimal points. Thank you, Joshua. So everybody see how we got to the 978, correct? All right. Now, the next most important thing that the lender is going to look at to determine their risk, and what they're trying to do is they're trying to determine risk into the future. And they're attempting to reduce their risk going forward. So we take our NOI, we know what that is, year one, and we divide that against our annual debt service, which we already know we paid off that first 12 months. And that equals 1.47 or $1.47. So can someone tell me what is the DCR telling us as the investor and telling us as the mortgage lender? Or them as the mortgage lender? What is the DCR attempting to measure or determine?
For every dollar invested, you get $1.47.
Say again, please.
For every dollar invested, you're getting $1.47 back.
Joe says for every dollar invested, you get $1.47 back. I wish that was correct, but that's not correct. Good try, though. I'll give some candy for that one. Yeah, you got a point?
The income is almost 1.5 times the payment.
Income is almost 1.5 times.
For every dollar of payment, there's $1.50 income.
Well, what they're saying is, good point there, sir. What they're saying is for every single $1 of debt service that we place on the property, your NOI better be $1.47 to cover it. Follow? Thanks, Josh. Hey, what Josh passed out here is just a key for your take home. For every dollar of debt that the lender is going to give us or place on the property, they want the NOI to be $1.47. So what is that saying about the lender's view of this property? Are they saying it's risk-free, it's low risk, or it's higher risk? It's low risk? Why do you say it's higher risk? We got higher risk and lower risk. Yeah, excellent point, sir. As he pointed out, it's got to be almost $1.50, more to cover that. What the lender is saying is that, hey, your property is not Class A. Your tenants are not the best tenants. You're going to have some trouble collecting the rent. You're going to have some trouble with that income stream somewhere, somehow, some way. So therefore, we want $1.47 to cover that debt. For example, typically a lender who looks at an apartment complex, let's say it's a 150-unit, brand new, built, got the clubhouse, got the swimming pool, got all the amenities. What do you think a DCR would be on a property like that?
90 cents.
Say again, Joe?
90 cents?
90 cents? I don't think they'd be that risk averse. Say again? 1.25? That is correct. He is correct. 1.25 is what historically they would do. And that is telling you that the lower the DCR, the less perceived risk is involved with making that loan. So it's kind of counterintuitive. You would think that $1.47, hey, that's low risk because you've got 47 cents to cover every dollar, right? But it's not that way. It's counterintuitive. It's like, okay, 1.25 means that the lender is making so much more, I don't want to say, they're making so much more of a risk-averse choice than this property. So what they're saying to us is, hey, your property's not the greatest, it's not in the greatest location, doesn't have the greatest tenant profile. You know, it's probably got some deferred maintenance, some obsolescence. So therefore, we demand more. So therefore, they're factoring or they're reducing their risk. And that's every step that the lender goes through is an attempt to, let's lower the risk, lower the risk, lower the risk. Everyone clear on the DCR? A very important ratio. Now understand, you're not a lender, right? But the lender, if they're going to offer you funds to purchase this investment property, they'll let you know what their DCR demands are. Just like the property tells you, hey, it demands 46% of the operating expense ratio to cover all that operation expense. Whereas in something like this, it tells you that risk is not, it's not risk-free, that the lender is looking to reduce their risk going forward. They're trying to hedge against, what capital markets might believe that DCRs will be. Now, the next factor you need to look at is the margin of safety. Now, understand what the lender is thinking here. The lender is saying, hey, if we have to take this property away from them, if we have to go to the courthouse and take it away from them, then we're not only going to get our annual debt service, we're also going to get $41,789. What number, does that look very familiar? What is the $41,000? BTCF, Joe. Excellent. That is the before tax cash flow. So they're saying not only are we going to get our annual debt service, we're going to get their before tax cash flow as a cushion for taking the property back. Everyone clear on that? Okay, let's move ahead. Now, this is the most important rate that the lender is going to obtain. Now, when we were looking at this property and we purchased it last year, didn't we pay 7.75% for money? What are lenders in the business of doing? They're in the business of selling money at interest to equity investors. That's their business. Whereas how come 901 is a lot higher than 7.75, what they quote it to us? Can anybody account for that? How about Zoomland out there?
Does it have to do with discounting?
Say again, please, sir.
Does it have to do with discounting?
Does it have to do with discounting?
Yeah, discounting future rates.
It does not have to do with discounting. What it has to do with a concept we talked about earlier. The investment, was somebody going to say something? The concept of getting your return on and your return of. The lender is getting both returns, return on and of, in the $88,000, correct? $75,000 of it goes to what? Interest. $13,000, which we figured our rate of return was, $13,000, correct? That adds up to the $88,000. So they are in fact getting return on and return of during the holding period. Whereas we as the equity investor are only getting the return on that we discussed as in our 12.81%. We won't get that return of until we sell the property. Everyone clear about why that rate is now higher? Isn't the lender looking at the mortgage constant the same way that the equity investor is looking at the cash flow? Isn't the annual debt service the lender's cash flow divided against the amount of principal loan amount that they laid out? Isn't that what's happening here? So therefore, their effective rate of return, or the rate of return that they're getting to make that loan, is 9.1%. And it's certainly not 7.75%, which they sold us the money at. It is also the percentage of every dollar that goes to pay that debt. But this number here, mortgage constant, is from the mortgage lender's point of view, the equity investor's point of view, and the all cash investor's point of view, the most important rate of return. And we'll see why that is most important when we look at the absolute laws of leverage. Let's move on. Now, the next thing that the lender wants to know is what is the maximum amount of loan that they're going to offer. Now, the 75% LTV was just the first look, the first glance. In reality, we just use the 75 as a teaching or learning method. In reality, the lender would go through these steps to say, hey, here's what our NOI is, mortgage constant times the DCR equals the maximum loan amount that we're going to offer. Is that lower than the 978? It is lower. And if you have any problems with these numbers, it's because your calculator is not rounding out to 6 decimal places. But the concept is absolutely the same. So they're not going to offer the full 978, excuse me. So what's going to happen? Equity investors going to have to come up with more cash at closing, right? Will that change your investment as the equity investor? Rate of return? It will. We're not factoring that is because we've just used the LTV. But I'm saying here is the metrics that the lender will go through to determine what their maximum loan amount will be to offer on that property. Because once again, they want to reduce their risk. You know, they don't want property. They do not want to manage properties. They don't want to take it back. What they want is that monthly payment, principal, and interest. That's what interests them. So everyone had the mortgage constant, cash on cash, and free and clear rate, right? Well, let me ask you, does this property have positive leverage or not? Based upon what we've worked out through this. Guess? How do we know? Anybody have a guess on that? Let's review one more time. Free and clear, 10%. Cash on cash, 12.81%. And the mortgage constant was 9.01%. What does that really tell us? Does that tell us anything other than, hey, that's what everybody has to demand? Lender is demanding 9.1%. Equity investor demanding 12.8. Free and clear, the hurdle rate was 10%. So how do we know if we have positive leverage or if it's a negative leverage? How would you know? How could you determine that from all the analysis that we've been through today? Any ideas what I term the absolute laws of leverage? As I said earlier this morning, you could go to the library, you could go anywhere and dig up 100 books on how to do real estate investment. You could spend a fortune on very expensive seminars taught by real estate gurus. And guess what? You would not learn anything about the absolute laws of leverage. And what I'm going to share with you today is worth your time and effort, because absolute laws of leverage will keep you out of trouble, will keep you from buying an upside down or negative cash flow or negative leverage property. Let's reveal it right now. These are true mathematical statements. The first two at the top in green, that's one true mathematical statement. On the bottom, negative leverage, that is one true mathematical statement. I actually had a student, one of my Silicon Valley students, figured up using geometry that these were true statements. Positive leverage will occur when the cash on cash is greater than the free and clear. And, can't separate that, when the free and clear is greater than the mortgage constant. And vice versa. Any time that the cash on cash is less than the free and clear rate of return, and less than the mortgage, the free and clear is less than that, less than the mortgage constant, you have negative leverage. And if you have negative leverage, what is the result of that? Say again?
Bad deal.
Bad deal equals negative cash flow. That means you're going to have to carry that property from your pocket. Financial leverage is, just like a fire. It doesn't care if it's cooking up your eggs or it's a wildfire. It's working for you or it's working against you. If you've got positive leverage working for you, and these two statements are true, wow. If that's working against you, wow. What do you think about this? Like that? This is the key right here. I could say, hey class, it's been fun, thanks. What would you think? What you should think is that you now know more than 99.9% of so-called investors and so-called real estate brokers who do income-producing property exclusively. That's what I think. Because the best, very best that I can remember from grammar school is that 12.81 is higher than 10%, and 10% is greater than 9%. Any? Yes, question out there. No? You see, we had to go through each step in order to see what the total productivity of the property is. What's my promise to you? I don't throw promises around easily, but the reality is positive leverage over a long period of time will make you rich. Say again, please. And negative leverage over a long period of time will put you in the poorhouse. Yeah. I've been using ARM loan. What's that?
Somebody on Zoom, are you asking questions or is this mic unmuted?
Well, I'm looking to see who's unmuted, but I don't see anybody that's unmuted.
I don't either. Everybody mute your mic in Zoom, please. But I don't see anybody.
Got a ghost.
Okay. Since the early 2000s, I've been using ARM, adjustable rate mortgage, like crazy. So up until about, probably about 3-4 years ago, I was paying 2.8% mortgage money. So anytime your mortgage is here and your rent is here, that's positive leverage. Over a long period of time, positive leverage will make you rich. In real estate, it's not a question of if, it's just how long it's going to take you to get there. Or if you're in the right phase of the market cycle to do so. In some phases of the cycle, it's not going to work. In other words, the cost of money is going to be more expensive than the productivity of the property. As they continue to raise interest rates, and the Fed is going overboard with raising rates, right? You know, they'll be jacking it up another 25, 50 basis points next time you turn around. So what that do? It has a direct relationship on mortgage interest rates. Banks, hey, say, here's what the prime rate is. We put 3 on top of that. So you have to understand where we are in the cycle to understand if you can use positive leverage or not. And if you're in a phase of the cycle or interest rates are high, you can't do it, then you have to step back. Sometimes you can't play in real estate. Sometimes you gotta be out of the market. Now, when I was a young pup, I designed this little thing here. You need a way to go. I actually had this drawn up on a piece of paper. And I'd go out and look at properties, yeah. So understand, this is what we did today, correct? We did all the free and clear, and we did the positive leverage. The rest are just scenarios where you could say, okay, what's the tipping point? You know, in California, we looked at properties and, you know, you'd have to put 50 or 60% down to get a 4% rate of return. So far upside down, it doesn't even make sense from a tax loss type strategy. So build yourself something like this to look at properties that you can compare apples to apples or oranges to oranges. How you choose to do that, that's completely up to you. I just chose to do it this way because it seemed like a rational way to look at properties and compare them and say, hey, here's side by side, what are we going to do? What kind of decisions are we going to make? Questions on this?
We lost audio on Zoom for just a moment. Would you mind sharing again what you were saying about for the last few years you've used ARMs? I'm assuming adjustable rate mortgages, but you cut out right after that.
Oh yes, what I was saying is since the early 2000s, I'd been using adjustable rate mortgages, and the overall rate was about 2.87%. They've gone up now. It's still below what 30-year mortgage is. It's about 4.5 now. But what if I wanted to refinance? There's no place I could refinance to anything that's that attractive in the market right now, right? So as long as the rate stays low and rents continue to increase, what's going to happen for me? Escalator goes up to the next level. And it will for you. Now, I'm not saying, hey, I'm special. I'm saying, You find a property that'll do like we have just analyzed, you do everything you can to get your hands on that property, because it's not only going to be good in the short run, it's going to be even better over the long run. And that's what this is for. I mean, we're never going to get this time together again. You have to take what you've seen here today and actually put it to work for you, because, you know, let me ask you a question. Is knowledge power? Who all believes that? Excuse me, before we get in that, Craig has a question or comment.
Well, I'm
Yes,
just
sir.
curious, are we still working with the 24-unit garden style apartment complex model to get to these cash-on-cash rate of return?
Yes, sir.
Really?
No, nothing's changed.
Well, okay.
Let's go back and look at it,
So I
Craig.
was trying to figure how we went from,
It's a microphone, don't need to repeat it for.
okay, I was asking if we were still working with the 24-unit garden style apartment complex, and I was wondering how we got from a 53.96 net income ratio down to a skinny 1% if it was cash over cash above what our mortgage. Let me get this straight. I gotta use your term.
Hey, that
I was looking at the positive leverage. You said the cash on cash rate of return is greater than the mortgage constant, which is 9.01. But if we were doing a mortgage to buy it, we would only be at 10%. We're actually only 0.99% over. In other words, we're not making 56%. We're only making less than 1%, right?
I don't know.
According to that.
So we're still talking about the net income ratio, Craig?
Yeah, well, I'm wondering about that, because when we go to this and we're trying to figure out whether we got leverage or not, if we've got 56% positive, 53.96 net income ratio, so it sounds like we got a 53.96 profit ratio going there.
No.
We don't have that.
No, sir.
What's the net income ratio for?
The net income ratio tells you how much of the net is going to the bottom line, whereas there's 100% of income.
Right.
So 46% of the income is burned up in the it's consumed in the property's operations.
Well, we had annual debt service in that, right?
No, we don't. There's no debt service there. What that tells us is what our net is going to be. 100. It just separates out 100% of our net operating income. Okay. You're saying, okay.
So then we have to take debt service out of that, and that's where we get to this.
Yeah, because debt service has nothing to do with the net income ratio.
Right.
The net income ratio is not a profit margin or a number which we divide against anything to determine anything, Craig.
Okay.
Look, can we go back there real quick, class? Yes. Let's help Craig think through this, please. Hey, this is his class. It's your class. Let's please make the most of it. That's we're. Okay, here we are. Now we built the cash flow model out correctly. We know that we have $111,000 of operating expense.
But debt service is not in it.
No, sir. We're at NOI. We're at this point in time. We're standing back here as the cash investor, going, "Hey, will this property produce for us what we want? Does it look good enough to go further?" Sometimes when you're doing cash flow models, as I said, you're looking at it, you're going, no. We're looking at this one going, hey, this looks good because property is only consuming 46% of its income, and the other 54% goes to the bottom line, if you will. But that's not a rate of return. That's not a ratio where you can say, hey, we can calculate anything against that, except to say, we know how much it's going to cost to operate the property, and 46 plus 54, that's 100% of the income. All we're doing is dividing out the income and the net income. So debt service has not yet come into play. We're still saying, hey, how effectively is this property being managed? So more than an income or rate of return ratio, what this is telling us is how efficiently the property is being operated. That's all it's really telling us. There's that, hey, these managers are managing the property. You know, they got the expenses under control. They're not, sometimes, managers will put the kitchen sink and everything else into the cash flow model, and it's not accurate. I did an analysis on a whole bunch of, very expensive properties one time. What we determined was managers were filling up the cash flow model with things that didn't belong in there, that weren't absolutely necessary to operate that property on a daily, monthly, annual basis. I told them, I said, hey, you need to get rid of the management. So understand, all this is telling us is how efficiently the property is being operated. It's not telling us what kind of rate of return we're going to get. So from here, we have our NOI. And if we did nothing else, we took that NOI, divided against our sale price, we did get a 10% rate of return. Then we decided to leverage up. Lender gave us the money. We got our before-tax cash flow after we paid our annual debt service. And that gives us our cash-on-cash rate of return, 12.81%. Then we look at,
Mr. Phillips,
yes,
we've lost the video signal of your slides.
you lost the video of the
The
slides?
slides, yes.
Okay, while we're waiting on that, so the operating expense ratio and the net income ratio simply tell us how efficiently the property is consuming its income. It doesn't give us any idea about what type of rate of return we could or could not get based upon, our equity investment. But these numbers here, these are the amount of cash flows that were kicked out from the property after we invested capital. Free and clear, we put out $1.3 million to get $130K to get 10%. Cash on cash, we took that equity out and we left $326K in the property. That first year, the before-tax cash flow was $41,000. We divide that out, we get our 12.81%. We went through the lender process, and we determined that the lender is not getting 7.75%. They're in fact getting 9.1% because they are in fact getting principal and interest every month, every year for the holding period. That's why they can offer a lower rate of return. While the equity investor who is in the most precarious or risky position demands the highest rate of return. Once again, you can't separate that risk from the reward. Ladies and gentlemen, out in Zoom land, Josh is working on it for you, okay? We should be back online momentarily. Any comments or questions? We could do a free question and answer. Doesn't have to be what we're talking about. Could be about anything about real estate while we're waiting.
Can you hear me on Zoom?
Yes.
Okay, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So if I don't have all of the concrete numbers to run everything that you've just done, can I use the 1% rule, or is that really a rule that doesn't always flesh to have you on the positive profit.
Ma'am, I do not know what the 1% rule is.
It's basically where you can start out receiving a rent of 1% of whatever you're paying for the property out of the gate.
What you would call that is a rule of thumb. We, step by step, have analyzed this property based upon the income that it would produce. Correct?
Yes, correct.
There are many rules of thumb in real estate that are really, I don't know what they measure. What about the gross, what is that, the gross rent multiplier? Anybody ever heard of that? What does that tell you? It tells you nothing because expenses have not been deducted. So therefore, it doesn't tell you anything. That's a rule of thumb. Oh, well, you want to, 10 times, income or whatever. That's just a rule of thumb. It's not really an absolute rate of return that we have factored based upon the amount of cash flow that has been thrown off from the property and the amount of equity invested that we have locked up in that property. Does that answer your question? I really don't know about...
Yes, you answered my question. Yes, you did. Sorry, I was on mute.
That's okay, thank you. I see that we're back online here. Okay. There's lots of ratios, rules of thumb. I don't understand that. I don't know what they're trying to measure. I can only look at it from these because this is real estate practice, real world stuff right here. Not, well, it should look like this or that. This is what it is. And if this is truly what has transpired, and that's what's happened over the last years that we've owned this property and operate it, then guess what? This is what's happening for us. And if that's happening for you, you have mailbox money. And it's only going to get better as we looked at the 5-year view. It's only going to get better for you as time goes on. It's not going to get worse. It's going to get better. Because what's going to happen is your debt's going to get amortized, rent's going to go up, you're going to keep your operating expenses down, you're going to be in a good position. You're going to be in a position that a lot of people would like to jump into right now, but they can't,
Ronnie, I don't understand. Go back
Yes.
to that 12-point-something.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, Craig.
If somebody borrowed money, they're in the middle line, and their mortgage constant is 9.01%, so they're operating on a 1% margin.
Who is operating 1%
I'm just
margin?
saying, if they had borrowed money to buy the property, they would be at the free and clear rate of return at 10%, right?
If the mortgage constant was 1% higher?
No. You got there, the mortgage constant is 9.01%.
Yes, sir.
Okay. If they have borrowed money to buy the property, they're at 10%.
Who?
The same people that have borrowed the money, their mortgage constant is 9.01, their free and clear rate of return is 10.0, so they're a less than 1% profit ratio?
No, you mean difference between those rates?
Yeah.
No, it doesn't matter. Now, what this tells you is you have a clear view. Now, what if they're real close, like it's, mortgage constant is 9.99,
Yeah.
and free cash on cash is, 10.8. It gets like more squat. It's not as clear. Here, it is very, very clear what's happening. So it doesn't matter that, it's 1% lower or 1% higher. Take any property that you're looking at. Do exactly the same thing. Apply these ratios. Then you come back and say, hey, I looked at this property and it's negative leverage. The lenders, their mortgage constant is, 13%. Then guess what? You have negative leverage, and you had better, instead of buying that property, you had better run for the hills. Because if you make the mistake of getting tied up in that property, you're going to have negative leverage, negative cash flow, and negative leverage and negative cash flow is like, okay, how long can you hold that over your head? That in a sense is really what's happening. Because leverage is either working for you or it's working against you. And if you got it working for you, it's beautiful. If you're in a negative leverage situation, you know, it's... I went to California, people were, you know, talking to me, hey, look, you know, I want to take a home equity loan to buy property, you know. Look, right now, it's you can't really leverage because the cost of the money is higher than the productivity of the property. So therefore, you're just going to have negative leverage, negative cash flow upon negative leverage upon negative cash flow. How long will it be before you go into bankruptcy? These are absolute laws. This is not if, maybe, kinda, sorta, shoulda, woulda. This is financial reality. And if you take these tools and go out into your market and apply these tools, just like we've looked at today, you will be able to say, hey, that's a great investment. Let's get some equity together and go get it. Or, hey, forget that, you know. Now, what we're talking about is a stabilized property. All we've done here today, we're not trying to value add. We didn't come in here and say, okay, it's a 24-unit apartment complex. We're going to knock down some walls. We're going to fix it up. We're going to value add. We're going to do that. We're not saying that. All we're saying is we're taking over this cash flow stream. That's all the cash flow there is from that 24-unit apartment complex. And the net. And all three of us have to look at it from the same perspective. Lender looks at that NOI exactly as the equity investor. Equity investor looks at it exactly the way the the free and clear does, because that NOI is going to tell you everything about the value, asset value of this property. Yes, sir.
Define mortgage constant for me, because evidently I don't understand.
No problem. Let's go back, Craig. Let's work through it. How the lender is looking at this property going, okay, are we going to make a loan? Is, number one, is Ronnie a bozo, or does he have some small competency in handling a property like that? Okay, well, hey, he might be able to pass that test. Next thing we want to know is how secure is that income stream, that NOI? So the ADS is the lender's stream of income. Lender says, yes, equity investor, I will give you almost $1 million in exchange for getting $88,000 every year, principal and interest. And in fact, if they are getting both principal and interest, principal was $13,000, interest was about $75,000, right? Adds up to 88 and some change. So that 88,000 is the lender's cash flow, their income. And they were happy to lay that out, that 9K there, in order to get 9%. Because it's the reason it's 9% because they're getting both principal and interest back monthly, annually. So, see, it's exactly the same as the cash investor and exactly the same as the equity investor. Because the equity investor says, hey, I'll leave in my $300,000 in exchange for $41,000 next year, which will give us almost 13%. And the cash investor said, hey, I'm happy to put $1.3 million into this because it'll give me $130K over the next 12 months and we'll get a 10% rate of return. Okay. Yes, sir.
Where does the ADS come from? I'm looking back on slide 83, it's not magically appears. What determines that ADS?
Yeah, it magically appeared when we decided that we wanted to approach a lender to give us some money that we don't have or that we wanted to recapture from the property. Where did I go? Here. Oh. 83. Almost there. There we go. Okay, so the annual debt service, or ADS, came about based upon these numbers. In order to get these numbers, you do need a financial calculator. But the lender would do it for you and say, hey, we need $88,000 because we're going to give you $900,000.
So it's a service fee?
Pardon
Is
me?
it basically a service fee?
No, that's the principal and interest.
Annually?
Yes, annually. You can look at it monthly, $7,000, but because when you're looking at cash flow models for investment, you look at it on an annual basis. But for property management purposes, you break it down to 12 months. But we're determining, they're determining, the lender is, should we make this investment or not?
I see it now. I didn't see it upside down at 88,000. I would expect that to be on the bottom instead of on the top. Interest paid plus the principal equals at ADS.
Yes.
About that, maybe times 25 years, you're paying about $2.2 million.
Yeah. That's in the future.
Yeah. That's why you got rid of it in 5 years.
Well, what I would say is, tenants will be picking up the bill out then too. They've been picking up the bill for me for a long time, It's just the way that it is. Okay, everyone, let's see what we're going to do next here. I think we're getting ready to sell this property, right? After 5 years? Everybody agree with that? Once again, these are the most important ratios that I could tell you. Look around, listen to some people, they don't know this information. You know it now. You have automatically separated yourself from everybody else. And I was going to talk about one last thing here. Everybody agreed that knowledge is power, right? Everybody raise your hand if you believe that. Well, if I said you're all wrong? All right, as I've said, real estate is the only business that I know. We have to look in the rearview mirror to see where we're going. So let's go back to when everybody was living in Bubble City. But before that, and this is going to tie into this, is this what we've done today? I over R equals V, where the I is the net operating income. The R is the overall rate, or all cash investors rate. And did we determine the value when we bought the property at $1.3 million today? This is exactly the steps we took. So the OAR was 10%, correct? Value of the property was 1.3, and the NOI was $130K. Now, because we're going to sell the property in year 5, in normal real estate investment analysis, what we would do is, if we bought on a 10% going in cap rate, because we've held the property 5 years, there's going to be more depreciation. There's going to be more deferred maintenance. Maybe we didn't do anything, right, except collect the rent. So deferred maintenance. in that 5-year period, there's going to be more newer properties coming online onto the market that our property's not going to be able to compete with, correct? So what we typically do in a normal equilibrium market, we would say, we're going to add 50 basis points onto our going-in cap rate to determine our terminal cap rate. Our terminal cap rate is what we're going to sell on. So in a normal market, we would say, hey, 10.5. Well, you say, well, what does that matter? What does that really tell us? Here is the most important thing that I could tell you about capitalization rates. Just like the absolute laws of leverage, this is absolutely true. The lower the capitalization rate, the higher the value of the property. It's an inverse relationship. You would automatically, intuitively think, oh, hey, a higher cap rate is going to mean a higher value of property because we're going to get a higher rate of return. That does not mean that. A group of investors wanted to invest with me. They said, we want a 13% cap rate. I said, I don't. 13% cap rate, that tells me you're going to have some trouble collecting that income. And I could be shot and or stabbed trying to go collect that rent. So the higher the capitalization rate, the lower the value of the property. So let that sink into your subconscious mind. So when you're talking with investors and they're talking about a high capitalization rate, you need to say, well, a lower capitalization rate would entail that the value of your asset is much, much higher. Everyone clear on this? Because intuitively, it's counterintuitive.
Is there a normal low or high? Is there like a cutoff that's just kind of range? And is there a range to it?
We'll look at it. Well, absolutely. We're just not there yet. We'll look at it. Let me tell you how important capitalization rates are. I was living in Houston, Texas. I was managing glass skyscraper kind of buildings in the NASA Clear Lake area. And it got to be I wasn't doing real estate anymore. I was an administrator. And, I didn't touch or do anything. I just had a work order, would talk, say, oh yeah, here, vendor needs to fix this, do that, we need Gussie. Yeah. Anyway, property management is, what I grew up doing. And I was, managing Class A kind of buildings, But I learned that there was a program at Texas A&M University, an hour and a half from our home in West Houston, Katy, and it was an hour and a half away in College Bryan Station. And I studied about the program and I learned more about it. And I thought I'd really like to be in this program. It really looks like it could take me to the next level. So I sent in my application, and I knew that my application would be rejected. Number one, I'm not their ideal student. I was already an adult with a family, with a career, so-called, with my own investment properties. And I wanted to be in that program, but I knew that if I just sent my paper in the front door, it would be rejected. So what I decided to do was to make the drive, the hour and a half, to see the director of the program, the land economics and real estate program at Texas A&M University. And without any exaggeration at all, it's probably the top 3 in the country, or top 5 in the globe as far as graduate real estate programs. If you take that level of study, you automatically qualify for MAI designation. That's an appraisal designation, the highest that there is. But that wasn't what I wanted out of the class. I wanted to learn. I wanted to learn. So I drove an hour and a half up there. I met with the director of the program, the older gentleman. This gentleman is a walking, talking encyclopedia of real estate and finance. And so we were talking, and I said, "Sir, I'd really love to be in this program, but I don't believe I can get in." He said, "Well, Ronnie, I've looked at your application. It looks good. What's the concern?" I said, "Well, the concern is my score on the GRE. The GRE is a standardized test that you have to take to get into graduate school." And he was leaning back with his hands behind his head. He said, "Well, how did you score on the GRE?" I said, "Of all the population of anybody who ever took the exam, only 15% scored lower than me." His eyes turned into saucers. And I said, "Sir, I couldn't even set up the problems, let alone solve them. I'm dyslexic. I couldn't solve the problems. I didn't even understand how to set the problem up. You got to set the problem up before you can solve the problem." He said, "Ronnie, what we do in this program, we talk a lot about capitalization rates. Can you tell me anything about capitalization rates?" I dumped it on him. "Sir, the lower the capitalization rate, the higher the value of the property. It's an inverse relationship." I just dumped all this all over him. Long story short, I left that drive on the hour and a half home knowing that the next semester I'd be in that program. Because he knew that I knew that I knew that he knew that I knew what I was talking about. When you get the opportunity, you'd better have the goods. Because if I hadn't been able to tell him that, "Well, Ronnie, thank you. Thanks for coming. I wish you the best." Right? Sometimes you just have to go outside and find out, who the decision maker is. Because had I not met with the director of that program and explained the situation, my file would have got shuffled into no thank you. I would have got the no thank you letter. And my self-esteem would have been decimated. So when you get the chance, you better have come through with the goods. Now, having said all that, here's what happened to capitalization rates in 2002. Now, the question over here with the gentleman was, well, is there normal capitalization rates or a range? Let's look at 2001. If you go back to when they started keeping capitalization rates all the way back to 1978, you will see that capitalization rates traded in a very tight range. They didn't go up, they didn't go down, they just stayed tight. In other words, if I want to buy a strip center or an industrial building, I'll earn 10% all day long, no questions asked. That's what the capitalization rate tells you. Hey, I'm going to get 10%, period. And if you go all the way back to 78, you'll see that they stayed up till 2002 in that very, very tight range. They didn't go up, they didn't go down. Now what happens in 2002? 2002, they do what I call a skydive. This is nowhere near any type of normal movement of capitalization rates or values. So can someone tell me what is happening in 2002? What has happened to capitalization rates? Based upon what we just talked about, the inverse relationship. The lower the capitalization rate, what? Higher the value of the property. Is that in fact happening right here? Believe me, that's what's happening right here. Capitalization rates are plummeting, skydiving. So what is happening to values? Well, they're not going up, they're soaring. They are skyrocketing. Okay? So in 2002, that told me that we are in a massive bubble. And I need to sit on the sidelines because there's no way that I can play that game. And all those people who are buying into a declining or plummeting capitalization rate, they're going to be in trouble in a very short period of time because they're all hoping, hey, we're going to dump our equity in here and then the lender is going to bail us out in a few years. That capital markets were frozen. 2005, they even went lower after that, 2006. Now, the only thing that is not missing here, because this is I over R equals V, is the NOI. And what have we talked about all day long today? NOI, right? NOI determines the value of the property. So NOI can only move in an incremental manner. From 2001, it's going to go up to 2002, 2003, 2004, 2005. So that told me investors are paying an astronomical sum of money to obtain or acquire roughly the same amount of NOI in 2005 that they could get in 2001. 2002, rational real estate investment went out the window. I mean, it just went like, it didn't even make any rational sense to try to value properties because this had never happened before. As I said, from 2001 going all the back way to 78, they stayed in that tight range. And why might they stay in a tight range over a long period of time? Because that NOI is based on what? Say again? Who said that? Love it. It is based upon net operating income. It's not based on anything else. It's not based upon accounting rules or anything like that. It's based upon actual rents. So looking at this, I mean, it was just a staggering, for me, a realization that, hey, this is crazy. How could this be happening? At that time, I'd like burned all my bridges to be successful in real estate, and I couldn't play in the market because I couldn't participate in this craziness because I knew in 2002 that we had switched over from being a normal market from 2001 to 2002. If a market goes from 20 billion, I can't count that high, 20 billion to 23, hey, that's reasonable. What about 13 to 12? It actually went down in industrial. 32 to 41, that's really a nice jump. And 11 to 28 in retail, that the rational valuation no longer makes sense. and that we are in a massive bubble because those capitalization rates, our rate of return. Look, we could have bought an apartment complex at what, 8.7? And it's what now, 5, is that 5.2? That's a massive amount of loss of rate of return that you're going to be able to get for accepting that kind of, paying that kind of price for a piece of income producing property. And from 2005, 45% income. 270 billion of core asset values just went through the roof. I have a theory. I believe that all the dot-com money went into commercial real estate during that period of time. All the movers traded out at the top, leaving everybody else with the poorer but wiser shares. Because Wall Street, when they realized my dog has fleas, .com is not going to earn $1 of revenue, they pulled the carpet out from under them, right? That capital flowed into all core assets, and that's why those values skyrocketed and rates of return plummeted. Any discussion on that? Look at that, 80% change from 2004 to 2005, 86 billion. Apartments are the most popular because most people can understand a gross lease. Majority of investors, to do office or retail, those are totally different animals. You have to have business acumen and knowledge to even invest in those kind of properties. 72% industrial, 39% office, 22% retail. Once again, this is just a different look at the difference in what a normal cap rate would be in 2000 to what it was in 2006. Those are devastatingly lower returns. And you're paying an absolute premium in order to get that NOI, which was, as I said, roughly the same in 2001 as it was in 2005, because NOI can only move incrementally. I can't go to my tenants and say, hey, tenants, the real estate market is skyrocketing, therefore I need X amount of dollars per month. Number one, they're going to tell you where to go. Number two, they're going to say, hey, we have a lease agreement, and I'm going to pay you exactly as the lease says, nothing more, nothing less. Right? So, it's just unbelievable. Now, if we go back to our model that we built out in 6, or 5-year model, and we're going to capitalize year 6 NOI. Everybody have the 154 or know where we got it? Do I need to go back? Everybody know where we got the 154 in Zoom land?
Can you go back and show us?
Okay, let's go back. Here we go. Does everybody see the 154 right there in year 6? Notice that we didn't add the annual debt service or the before tax cash flow because we're not going to be there. We're going to sell the property. But the 154 is what the new investor is going to earn over their first 12 months of holding the property, correct? Everybody follow this. If you don't have this, you're going to miss a component that we need to sell the property here.
And that was a 3% increase, correct? If I remember
That's correct. You're absolutely correct. So escalating 3% from 130K to 154. You see how that was moving in an incremental fashion? Because it's based on rents. You can't just go to your tenants and, hey, I'm going to jack up the rent. Just because the real estate market is soaring. So everybody see how we got the NOI for year 6, correct? Okay. Okay, so see what we're doing here on year 6, where we went in our going in cap rate at 10%, and what we would do in a normal market is add 50 basis points. So in a normal equilibrium market, our 10% going in cap rate would become 10.5% in a terminal cap rate. Everybody follow that? But we have to look at what was actually happening in the market. And then we have to apply the cap rate based upon what the reality of market conditions were at that time. All right, okay, there we go. Okay. All right, so year 6, NOI. So based upon the cap rates that we just looked at, and what we're saying is we bought the property in 2000 and we're selling in 2005. Using the normal 10.5% terminal cap rate will not work in this market because values and cap rates have skydived from 10.5 to 7.5. And if it's 7.5 divided against our 154K, guess what our sale price is? Is that not an astronomical sale price from what we paid for it, 1.3 just 5 short months ago, 60 months ago? What I would say is that's unsustainable. That's unrealistic. But that's exactly replicates what was happening in the market during that period of time. So let's compare those two together, the going in cap rate and the terminal cap rate. Look at the difference. What would you say about those two numbers? Say again, please.
Say, take it if you can get it.
Take it if you can get it? Well, I like that attitude, Joe. Take it if you can get it. Well, that was once in a lifetime, wasn't it? That period of time was so off the rails. It was crazy. If we bought at 1.3 on a 10% cap rate, and now capitalization rates have done a skydive down to 7.5. Look how it's increased our value, but our rate of return has, gone down to 7.5, right? Should we sell this property? You're going to sell it? Who else is going to sell the property? Y'all getting out quick, huh?
Depends.
It depends? Or, say again over here?
Depends.
What does it depend on?
Well, if there's another better opportunity that you can roll that into, or if you're trying to figure out to stay up. There's other factors that we don't know.
Well, That is very well said. So on two key points you made there, number one is if there's other opportunities. So based upon that, if we're earning 10% and we take our new equity of $2 million, which we haven't built the model to get down to the net sale proceeds, but if that's our starting point, our sale price, what are we going to do with that equity? You were getting 10%, and now if you take that 2 and turn around, are you going to find any 10% rates of return?
Costa Rica.
Pardon me?
Costa Rica sounds good.
Costa Rica, you know. There's lots of places in the world where you could get rates of return if you weren't concerned about a lot of things. Hey, I've traveled the world, believe me. What?
It looks like a lot of money, but when I was looking back.
It looks like a lot of money.
Well, when I was back at the PGI, potential gross income of $254,000, that's 3 years worth of income there.
Mm-hmm.
So if you hold it on for 5 more years, you're gonna increase your value's gonna increase a little bit more. I'd rather just keep the property and make it $254,000 a year, because in 3 years it's gonna recoup whatever I'm gonna get out of it, $700,000. I think in the long run, capital gains in the long run, I think I'll be ahead keeping the property.
You're not making 254 a year, you're making 41 a year because you got the note.
It's the same story, though. I mean, the amount is different, but the effect is exactly the same, because we're still riding the escalator up, correct? I would.
Would you sell
yes.
it?
What?
Would you sell it?
Well, you know what my personal philosophy is?
Never sell your cash cow.
What? What's that?
Never sell your cash cow.
Yeah. Always buy, never sell. Yeah.
It depends on your investor's goal, your season of life, and all of that too.
Well, what I would say is if you sold this property, you've got a problem on your hands. You're going to have a fistful of cash in your hand. And a fistful of cash is exactly like a fistful of sand. If you don't have somewhere to reinvest those funds, you have damaged yourself economically because you're no longer earning that 10% over the long run.
And it wouldn't be the time you want to buy, the cap rate's down.
Yeah, absolutely. What's that in the back there? Let us in on the private joke back there. What's that? You're good? Okay. Okay.
Yeah, but I'll see what it's like, it is.
Well, it creates a dilemma, and this actual phase of the cycle is a great teaching tool, because at that period of time, back at this period of time, let's look here. Okay, in 2002, if I couldn't buy any properties, what do you think my real estate strategy was? Say again? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you clearly, please.
To hold what you had.
Hold what you have, yeah, okay.
Teach classes, do seminars?
Say again?
Teach classes, do seminars?
Didn't you go to Europe to all the art museums?
I did. Yeah, well, I'm not bragging or anything, but, for so long, up to that point in time, I had my head down in real estate, Real estate is, I don't know why all these get-rich-quick guys have this illusion of the, rags to riches stuff, They present it like, passive income. It's hard work. It is, hard work. You want to work all day, then you want to work, late hours into the night, keeping your budget straight, keeping your, expenses down so that your rates are right, dealing with tenants, dealing with problem properties. It's continuous, so it's not like this, it's just not the panacea it's presented to be. But in fact, if you look at the ratios that we looked at today, real estate will make you, financially independent over a long run. It's not get rich quick, it's get rich over a long period of time. I just didn't jump into real estate a couple of years ago and say, hey, here I am, I mean, I wanted to build it up to where I felt I had enough knowledge to share with people. But during that period of time, I traveled the world because there was no investments available in real estate. So in 2006, I get invited after I've traveled everywhere to go lecture at a college in Silicon Valley. And I go out there and, and I tell them, all my students, hey, listen, classes, the cycle's almost reached a saturation point because all this had been happening, skydiving cap rates, skyrocketing values. I knew it was only a matter of time before the roller coaster ride went. And I told all my classes, look, we're going to reach a saturation point. And when we do reach that saturation point, then property values are not only going to decline, as I said earlier, across the U.S., but here in Silicon Valley. That's exactly what happened. 6-8 months later, they were all clamoring around. How did you know? How did you know? I just watched the cycle. You got to know when to be in that cycle and when to be out, when to go long and when to, hey, don't entangle yourself in it. So to answer your question, I just hung on to the properties. Even at that time, a large amount of my tenants had split, and I had to, pay mortgages out of pocket to carry it, because I sure didn't want to lose them. And, now the cycle has come back to where, is it going to be like this again? 2023, 24, we're still in a healthy expansion. But at what point is it going to tip and go into a massive boom? Some people think it's there already. I don't believe so, because we're still underbuilt by trillions of units. Millions of single-family homes and multifamily homes have to be built in order to satisfy that demand that is, there or not there. So these are, real estate does not operate in a static or vacuum. You have to continuously monitor, where are we in the cycle? Where are we with capitalization rates? Where are we with interest rates? All those things are always impinging upon you to determine, what is the wisest investment decision I can make going forward? And sometimes during this period of time, I judged myself after this period as a real estate investor by all the properties I did not buy. Because I could have leveraged myself up into any kind of nonsense. I could have went to a lender and said, look, I've got a dog house. And the dog house has got a chimney on it. And some lender would have gave me $1.2 million on the dog house. And then what would have happened? I've been in the dog house. Because at the end of the day, all I had was a dog house, right? Lenders were, they would finance anything at lightning speed. We had a perfect secondary market. And in East Tennessee terms, they call what happened was a gully washer. It just totally blew out the secondary market. It still hasn't recovered. We still don't have the secondary market that we had. And, you know, they're always trying to cut into the mortgage interest rate. I appreciate, you know, NAR always standing up, keep banks out of, you know, out of real estate. Is it true that NAR has kept banks out of real estate? NAR is the largest trade association in the United States. And they have, in fact, kept Wall Street and those type of lenders out of real estate. Because if they get a hold of it, guess what? It's over. It's over for everybody in this room. Because the lender will be saying, or, you know, the lender will be saying, hey, would you like to do a listing for us? Oh yes, we'll pay you $20 an hour to do our listing for us. While we're taking the 6 or 7, well, if they can control the market, hey, we're now the market maker, 10%. You'll be paying 10% to do transactions, right? Meanwhile, while you're paying you, the broker, to get some hourly wage to do the work. That's exactly what will happen. As long as, you know, they've had designs on it for a very, very long time. But NAR has said no. No banks and real estate. Okay. Other comments on that? Association of Realtors is an amazing body. And it's my pleasure to get to stand before you. It's a privilege for me to get to speak for you and to you. And I hope that you know, you're gaining a lot from the class. So I was telling some members here that the most enjoyable part of my day is meeting with you all, because I can learn from you all. But we're not anywhere near done yet. We're going to keep on going. So really, understand when you're looking forward into real estate, look at where the cycle has been, where we are now, and where it's going. And if you know where we are now, where it's going to be, or how it's going to happen in the next phase, you can stay ahead of the curve. You can say, hey, investor, now is not the time to invest. Or, hey, this is the perfect time. We can get positive leverage. Let's go. So until you kind of take everything in this class and amalgamate it together, you know, you're really guessing about a lot of things. This class, the tools have taken the guesswork out of it. The property has told you what it demands. The investors, cash, equity, mortgage, they've all told you, here's what we demand, our rate of return. If you can get positive leverage, hey, do it, do it, do it, do it. If you cannot get positive leverage, don't advise your principals and don't do it yourself, because the consequences won't be good. So, to sell or not to sell? That's the question. How are we doing on time, Catherine? Time for a break. Okay. What we're going to do is we're going to determine if we should sell this property or not, and then we're going to look at depreciation, and then we're going to look at being a qualified real estate professional, and we'll probably wrap it up from there. Yeah.
Then, can you answer the question?
Absolutely. Go right ahead, please.
Well, you can look when you come back. You said, well, that you do not sell.
I'm sorry, please.
You said earlier that you do not sell.
I don't understand.
You don't sell.
He said you would earlier,
Oh.
you would not sell, because I asked you if you would or not.
That's just my personal strategy. I'm not trying to influence the class any way or the other. I'm just saying that that's my personal beliefs about investment.
I'm curious the reason why.
Because the longer you hold the property, the more valuable it's going to become. And I'm saying that over long periods of time. I was talking with someone earlier who's asking me about property in Spring Hill, Tennessee. Anybody know where that's at? Williamson County, south of Davidson. Okay, I bought property over there in 1998. It was horse pastures over there, okay? It's just absolutely exploded over there. Okay? Is my rent check coming in? Has the value gone like this? You better believe it. Why would I sell that property? If I sold that property, what am I going to put it into? I have to understand that if you're getting a rate here, and if you can sell into the market at a rate that's here, you go right ahead and do that because you're going to win. If you cannot get your hurdle rate and you sell that property, you have damaged yourself economically long into the future because you cannot recapture that. But it's just my philosophy, just my experience, you know.
Thank you.
You're most welcome.